Hello there and welcome back. If you remember, when I shared my journey on becoming a tour guide in Singapore, I prepared a set of 14 itineraries for the tourist assessment. I also mentioned that I would not let these preparations go to waste and find a means and ways to share what I have found out. This video explores the first set A, a walk through time, and I'm calling it the virtual SG series. Now, in the tourist guide examination set A, the theme is a walk through time. The itinerary begins and ends at Tourism Court at Orchard Spring Lane, where STB is located, as with all itineraries. Because of the standardization of start and end points, coach routes tend to be duplicated over several itineraries. Therefore, this video will only cover the walking sections. Obviously, commentary of this tour should cover both the historical bits and present bits of information with reference to time. It is apt then that this tour should give participants an idea of the development of Singapore from beginning to now. The first locality in the Colonial district should provide insights into the founding of modern Singapore. The second stop proceeds to Fort Canning Park, providing perspectives into both pre-colonial Singapore and wartime Singapore. Sites visited include the Spice Garden, Kramat Iskandar Shah, and the Battle Box. Finally, the last stop at Toa Payoh Town brings the tourist back to present-day Singapore, tracing the development of post-merger Singapore, covering sites such as Toa Payoh Town Centre and the HDB Gallery before ending back at Singapore Tourism Board. Now, our virtual tour will be conducted on Google Maps. Zooming into our first stop. Old Parliament House and now the Arts House is next to Victoria Memorial Hall. This building served many purposes for which it was not designed for. Originally intended to be the residence of John Argyle Maxwell, it was used as a government building, first as offices, then courthouse, then Supreme Court, then Parliament. John Argyle Maxwell is a Scottish merchant who bought this nice piece of land with river views. Right over there, you can see the river. Imagine buying this nice piece of land with river views, then hiring the best architect of the time, G.D. Coleman, to design this little bit of England in 1896, only to be told, hey, you can't live here. If I was John, I'd be pissed. The man who decided he couldn't live here was none other than Sir Stamford Raffles, the man who founded the settlement of Singapore. So there's no argument there. Who is the winner? This fellow Sir Stamford Raffles is probably the most famous white man in Singapore after Santa Claus. And we can see an image of him right here. We all learned in school about how he had a vision for this backwater island, like an epiphany of sorts, when he supposedly landed right on this very spot on 28th of January 1819. Although I like to think he was probably high and drunk and half hallucinating, because what's the first thing to greet you when you get off ship on a jungle of an island? Mosquitoes. And you don't think much of mosquitoes when you're high and drunk. Plus, you get creative, and so, when he landed here, he must have said, "Hmm, I will have myself a trading settlement here for the East India Company, even though I know the Dutch are really in charge here. And I will legitimize my project by installing an exiled sultan with disputed claims to these lands." And that was what he did. This was a ship on which he sailed into Singapore with William Farquhar. This is an image of Sir Stamford Raffles, and the name of the ship is the Indiana. This here was a treaty that was signed nearby at the big field known as the Padang, and that was how Singapore came to be in the possession of the English. Now, some people will say it's blasphemy that a high and mighty officer should be so drunk on official business. But this fella has a proven obsessive compulsive disorder to be organized. So how could he be sober when he came up with such a zany plan? The proof comes in 1822 when he decides to recategorize the colony into districts by ethnicity. The colony would be organized into Chinatown, Chinese Kampong, Kampong Chulia, Kampong Glam, European Town, and government districts. At that instant, in 1822, John Argyle Maxwell's plan to stay by the Singapore River in his beautiful English house, somewhere over here, was fucked. Now, this river you see before you is the river for which this country is named after. And for good reason. The first 50 years of the colony, shophouses across us handled 3/4 of all shipping trade passing the strait, making merchants like John Argyle Maxwell filthy rich, and the river, well, just plain filthy. It was said you could smell the river before you saw it in those days. It might be quite hard to imagine, but this was bulky up until the 1970s. I mean, look at all the rubbish floating on the water here. And well, this is today, or close to today. The result of a 10-year effort that literally sucked the life out of the river. Markets, pig and duck farms, squatters, industries, and anything that could have used the river as a toilet were all relocated. The 10-year cleanup culminated in a mass swim event that proved the water clean enough to swim in. This event was known as the first swim across Singapore River. Back when the water was black and oily, one would need a boat to cross the river. This went on until 1867, when it was decided to build a bridge to mark 50 years of the colony's establishment in 1869. That bridge is in front of us now and is known as Cavernac Bridge. It was first made in Glasgow and then shipped here for assembly. Now, the marker puts the year 1868, when in fact the bridge was completed in 1869. Shipping and travel times then took much longer than today. In 1867, it took 120 days to get from London to Singapore via the Cape of Good Hope. The Suez Canal only opened in November 1869. As mentioned before, this bridge takes its name from the last governor of the colony under British India. His coat of arms visible on the beam of the bridge. The colony was upgraded to report directly to London in 1867. Unlike John Argyle Maxwell, who preferred to be in the thick of merchant action by the river, Sir Stamford Raffles chose to live on a hill. This hill is where we will visit next. And it's the same hill that kings from the very old Singapore, dating back 600 years, chose to extend their rule from. To the locals, this was known as Bukit Larangan, Malay for Forbidden Hill. To Raffles, this was Government Hill. Now here's another reason I believe Raffles was drunk when he first landed. Having concluded the zany idea of settling on the island, he had to find out how useful the land was. In the normal sense, a person would first determine this before entering into a contract with the locals. But Raffles was no normal man. He was a visionary, and visionaries had the habit of acting first, following up later. So it was that he set up a botanical garden on the slopes of this hill to determine the type of cash crops that would thrive on this island. At the Spice Garden is a collection of some of the plants he could have experimented over. One plant we are certain he did try was nutmeg. The nutmeg was in that era a valuable crop. Half a kilo of that stuff could get you 3 sheep in Europe. The flesh is good for candy. The nut-like mace, covering the seed when dried and ground, gives a sweet, woody, pungent spice. The seed can be pressed into oil or ground like mace to spice desserts. The hallucinogenic nature of this fruit, giving the consumer a feeling of a floating high, made it extremely coveted in Europe. Come to think of it, maybe this was what Raffles was high over. Nutmeg was such a profitable venture that by the 1840s, nutmeg plantations covered the island, particularly the Orchard Road area, for which Orchard is named after. While Raffles was credited with the founding of modern Singapore, he was not the first to set his sights on the potential of this island. Kramat Iskandar Shah is perhaps the last remaining proof that civilization existed before Europeans came with their civilizing agenda. The Karamat, or holy shrine before you, is reputed to be the burial grounds of the last king of the Kingdom of Singapura in the late 1300s. The Kingdom of Singapura came to be when the Srivijayan prince, escaping the Majapahit Empire, fled to what was then Temasek. Upon landing, he saw a lion which he took as a good omen to establish his kingdom, and from which his kingdom and this island takes its name, Singapura, also known as Lion City in Sanskrit. The kingdom would not last 100 years before the Majapahit caught up. Sending the last king, Paramiswara, also known as Iskandar Shah, running to Malacca and founding the Malacca Sultanate. How he ended up here, or whether he did end up here, we don't know. We do know that this site is sacred and is what remained and what Raffles found when he first surveyed the hill. And this site commemorates him, perhaps, as a representative of all the kings and subjects before him, for it is said that the Majapahit spared no one when they sacked the island. The elevated nature of this hill at 40 meters, a nearby spring, and a view of the settlement made this location a strategic place for many things. Firstly, it was a great place to announce that the island was British, with what better way than a flag? Next, it was good for holding a lighthouse with which to mark the island out to ships. Finally, it could serve as a defensible refuge if a fort was built. The fort came to be named after Viscount John Charles Canning, the Governor-General of India at the time. Remnants exist today, such as this fort gate. In 1907, the fort was changed to take on a more underground nature. Most of the original fort was demolished and rooms at 3 stories deep were built into the hill, from which to coordinate Army, Navy, and Air Force operations of the Empire in Southeast Asia. It was here in 1942 that the British forces under General Percival decided to surrender to Japanese forces in World War II. Our next stop takes us to the town of Toa Payoh. I feel that a better stop could have been put here, where walk through time is concerned, but hey, who am I to question the foremost authority on tourism in Singapore? Either it was included to fill in for the three-stop requirement, or it is intended to show the transformation of life on the island from squatter to modern living. If it was the latter, there isn't enough contrast with the content of the first two stops to make an impression. Maybe how I will go about saying this is how before most people came here thinking they would go back to their home countries when they have earned enough. But when the war was over and the world changed, there was this consensus amongst people who lived through the colonial administration and war here, a common experience that they now connected more here than with their homeland, and that this might be their home for good. From this came a nation-building aspect that was Toa Payoh New Town, the first satellite town containing answers to all the needs a citizen would require. From this model of social housing came other towns, complete with amenities like libraries, transport nodes, industrial jobs, commercial facilities, schools, and sporting arenas. And this is how 80% of Singaporeans currently live. In the HDB gallery, one finds a scale model of Toa Payoh town, showing how a satellite town is compartmentalized into several neighborhoods, each with its own neighborhood center, such as this. The town center, where the MRT is and the bus interchange, then serves as the link to other parts of the island. The gallery will also showcase development of social housing evolving with the times. Cases in point are HDB's two newest towns, Punggol and Tengah, both of which have developed its own identity as waterfront and forest towns, respectively, to create a sense of character in an otherwise uninteresting cookie cutter group of satellite towns scattered all over the island. For a complete view of Singapore's social housing, since one is already here at Toa Payoh, a visit to HDB's My Nice Home gallery is recommended. In this gallery are a series of showrooms fitted out to give a sense of what it's like living in a flat built to order and the typical Singaporean's living quarters. When satisfied, take a walk around the town centre's shops to see the businesses that thrive in what's called Singapore's heartland. To name a few, bubble tea shops, Chinese medical halls, coffee shops, or what's locally known as kopitiams, bakeries, mobile phone shops, hair salons, tuition centers, and fruit grocers are Ruby quiches. The island has certainly come a long way in a little over 200 years, a relatively short time. It had its first chance in the 1300s as a kingdom of Singapura, which did not last 100 years. Its second chance came in the 1800s as a British colony, defeated after 150 years by World War II. We are now living more than 50 years into our third chance. While we know not what the future brings, one thing is for sure: 5 million of us will continue on this walk through time.